not feeling good enough? Well, of course you don't. And let me tell you why. So, this issue plagues Western humanity. And in fact, the whole industry of psychotherapy is largely funded on this problem. And in fact, if you look carefully at people, where there's not problems, we create problems in order to fix problems, right? Because it's kind of the idea. There's the up dog, the down dog, one of us looking up to the other, one of us controlling the other, issues of power and control. So let me take a step back, right? If you think about almost all societies just to a few hundred years ago, all industry was craft industry. The chair that I'm sitting on would be from a tree that I cut down or my neighbor cut down, that someone cut up, refined, sanded, formed into a chair. Now, if you think about that person's life, whether it's myself or someone else, how many chairs did we make? Not very many. And how perfect were they? Not at all. Because they're all flawed from being trees made by flawed people who don't make lots of them. So we would make as many chairs as we need, and when we didn't need more chairs, we would stop. And in fact, we would actually fix very many chairs instead of throwing them away, right? Because you just think about college kids leaving, and you look at the dumpsters outside of their dorm, there's a reason it's called dumpster diving. So, that's not the point. The point is, for most of human history, that's how we worked. We created things when we needed things, and we didn't throw them away, and they are good because they were functional. Then if you think about what happened at the end of the 1700s, in England there was the Industrial Revolution, right? And then by the end of the 1800s, people were leaving farms and going to cities to build things. Now, very much things became standardized. A thing, if it didn't have all the pieces fit just right, it wasn't good, it was thrown away. Things were replaceable. We have planned obsolescence now. But what is really fascinating is when a craft person made a chair by hand, right? Their identity wasn't tied up in the chair itself. It was tied up in their craftsmanship. I'm a creator, right? I'm a creator, not a producer, not a thing maker. I'm a creator. When people went and moved into cities to work at large industrial factories, right, what did they do? They became essentially indentured servants. They spent long periods of time indoors being barely paid, right? And how were they valued? You were valued by how productive you were and how much you could get done in a certain amount of time, and at the same time being given as little as possible for doing it. And if you missed too many days, or you slacked off, or you spoke too much, you would be fired. We don't throw away people, do we? You would be fired and easily replaced by someone else who wanted your job. Now, what happened then? You took that meager amount of money to live in a small apartment to fill it up with things that were made in other factories just like yours. So the system created a way to manufacture people. They were taught to be productive, not creative. Because think about it. A creative person who's putting a screw into a chair, they're not going to put it in the right place. They're going to be a problem, right? So what did that do to our humanity? It taught us being productive is key. It told us to follow directions to be a good employee, right? Our humanity was constructed for us. Now, if you want to keep your job and to continue to pay for your apartment, you should get to work on time. You should work hard. You should do what your boss tells you, right? Now, the reason you should do those things is because if you don't, you will be fired and you might starve. Now, this is a legitimate judgment. This is a judgment that a rational person can make between the pros and cons of working their job and not. Now, as time has gone by, we realize that not all this is super healthy for us. But this type of humanity, one where we are also a product of our society, where our value is how efficient and productive we are, the same way we judge computers and printers and everything else, it's become part of who we are. And then at the same time, we live in a world where we have this concept called, quote, self-esteem. Now, if you ask someone to explain to you what it is, they'll kind of have this idea, but it's really, really kind of hard to describe, right? And an old way of talking about it is you hold something up in esteem, right? There's a value to it, right? You kind of look up to it. And a kind of a correlate is pride. I pride in myself. Now, self-esteem has a hyphen in it, and the self part, again, implies the individuation, the separateness from the whole, right? So you kind of value yourself above the other people. So there is a slightly implied narcissistic quality in self-esteem. Now, don't go down the rabbit hole of thinking about all the terrible narcissists in the world. That's not my point, because there is healthy narcissism. We should love ourselves. But the point is, in I think it was the 50s and 60s, definitely in the 60s, Carl Rogers was doing person-centered work, and he was teaching educators how to build self-esteem in children, because they realized that people with higher self-esteem had better outcomes. They had better grades, they made more money, they were more successful. See? It kind of just builds self-esteem in this same hamster wheel of society and capitalism. It's terribly frustrating. So, I'm also, again, not saying we shouldn't have self-esteem, because it is very helpful. There's actually a problem in the core of the concept. One, it implies self over others. We are just as much an individual as we are a part of a collective and community. The words I speak to you only matter to you or me because we, all of us as a group, agree that they have meaning. The same way $1 is only valuable because we all agree that it has value. So that being said, self-esteem has a problem. People who have self-esteem, you think about perhaps star athletes or successful musicians, whatever, they have self-esteem, but they've never actually actively tried to acquire self-esteem. Just one day they had it, and they've always had it. Now, on the other hand, there's multitudes of people who would state that they have low self-esteem or no self-esteem, and it's true, they don't. And they work really hard to try to get it. Now, here's the interesting thing. They don't ever get self-esteem. All they get is more and more awareness that they lack self-esteem. Now, they're suddenly a failure at getting self-esteem. They have another quality that's inadequate. So self-esteem is a trap that goes round and round and round. So, my encouragement to you is, if you feel like you don't have enough self-esteem, fine, acknowledge it. The real key to getting out of this is self-compassion. Compassion is an emotion. Compassion is a behavior. Compassion is when you get in the muck with a person and you help them through. Compassion requires empathy and validation. So, if you're self-critical and you suffer from low self-esteem, look for the valid, not the right or wrong. And by valid, what I mean is, hey Dan, what is your favorite color? I could say blue, I could say orange, I could say purple. They're all valid. But if I answer, Dan, what's your favorite color? And I say the number 2, a knife, right? That doesn't make any sense. So what you're seeking is validity, something that makes sense in reality that everyone else shares. As far as, take for example, this presentation, what I'm trying to do is help whoever watches this understand how to be less critical of themselves and to have a greater sense of self-worth. I am certain there will be others who can do this better than me. I am also certain there are others who they just don't even have the concepts yet. Either is okay. That's not the point. The question is, am I effective at helping whoever's watching this see value in their self? Now, the person who's sitting here watching this, they can sit and imagine, okay, am I doing a good enough job trying to understand what Dan's talking about? Maybe. Maybe not. But by good enough, what do we actually mean? And the purpose really is, are you getting the information? Are you taking the step forward? Or are you still kind of stuck? Or are you kind of blocking it or ignoring it or finding reasons to be distracted? Now, the way our mind works, we will be distracted. Just come back, right? Don't judge yourself for it. Just notice when it wants to slip away, and then remind yourself what your intentions are. My intention is to be kind to myself. My intention is to see my value. So that being said, I hope this is helpful. Self-esteem is a slippery slope and a mess, right? Stop chasing it. Work at finding self-compassion, and it'll work out much better for you.